The most dramatic competition right now between the United States and China is on the technology front. And that competition goes from everything to who designs the technology, to the chips that we use in all of our devices, to how you should act in cyberspace, what type of attacks should be allowed, what type of data should be collected, to who governs cyberspace, what rules should decide how states, nations, and individuals behave. And it's a competition that, as I said, goes all the way from the chip to these broad ideas of governance. And I think in some ways it is the most important competition that we are in with China right now. What I'm going to do is talk about why it matters to the US and China, talk a little bit about what's happened so far, how the two sides have reacted to each other, and then I'll finish with some kind of speculation about what's going to happen in the immediate future. Why it matters so much, right? On the digital side, cyberspace hits three primary concerns for China. The first one, which is the one we're probably most familiar with, is that the Chinese are worried about how the internet might empower opposition, domestic opposition, right? The free flow of ideas into China that people will use to protest against the Chinese Communist Party, organize protests. And so they have built a very vibrant, technologically advanced system for keeping information out, right, known as the Great Firewall of China. And the Chinese have gotten very good at keeping that technology out and keeping certain things, images, ideas offline in China. When President Xi and President Obama met each other in September of in June of 2015 at Sunnylands, they went for a walk together in the afternoon. You may remember, President Obama was rather lean. President Xi is slightly portly. And some Chinese citizen decided that that photo looked a little bit like Tigger and Winnie the Pooh walking around. And so that became a meme that circulated in China, Tigger and Winnie the Pooh. And the Communist Party decided that that was too dangerous. And so if you sent someone a text in China saying, isn't this a funny picture, the Chinese technology became sophisticated enough that they could strip off the image of Winnie the Pooh, but the text would still go through. So they were really reaching into people's personal communications to block that information. So prevent the information from coming in. Also, the Chinese are worried long term that they're going to be dependent on the West for technology. Right? We think about China as factory to the world, but the Chinese don't want to be the factory to the world forever. They want to move up the value chain. Right? There are economic reasons. You don't want to constantly have most of the value be with the people that own intellectual property rights. Right? If you manufacture and put together the iPhone, most of the value goes to the patent holders, not to the people who are putting the phone together. So the Chinese want to move up the value chain, and they see the digital space as being an area where they should be able to compete with the United States and with the West. And then finally, the Chinese are worried about security. They're worried about cyber attacks on their networks, about the United States stealing data from them, and what the United States might do to China through a cyber attack. We hear a lot about the Chinese attacking the US. We don't hear very much about the US attacking China, but I have to assume, and I want the US military to be doing somewhat similar things to China on their networks. And the Chinese are worried about that, right? How do you keep possible attackers out of that space? So those are the three concerns on the Chinese side. On the US side, we have similar concerns. We're very worried about the cybersecurity threat, right? So General Alexander, who had been the former director of the NSA and Cyber Command, once described the theft of intellectual property from US companies as the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. Or as another cybersecurity expert put it, there are two kinds of companies, those who've been hacked and those who don't know it yet. Right? So we know that the Chinese engaged in a widespread campaign of industrial property theft. Much of it was directed at the technologies that the Chinese wanted to move up the value chain in. Right? So if you were in autonomous cars or artificial intelligence, certain areas in biotech, you were very likely to be targeted, and you were very likely to probably have been penetrated and your information stolen. So the US wants to stop that, and we're worried about other broader security risks. And for the first time, we are really, truly worried about competition from China on the tech side. Right? It used to be that we thought of China as a place that everything was copied, right? But we are beginning to see that China is, in fact, succeeding in moving up the value chain. And partly the reason that they're doing that is they're spending, they've increased the spending on their research and development by double digits for 20 years, right? So China now spends about, depending upon how you measure it, $285 billion a year on R&D. The US still spends more, but China is now number 2, and China will soon pass the United States, especially since we don't spend that much any longer. We used to spend 2% of GDP on R&D. We now spend less than 0.7%. So the Chinese are going to pass us eventually on how much they spend. 8 million university graduates a year, about 1.5 million of them in the STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Chinese scientific publications have gone up, citations have gone up. So China is clearly moving up the value chain. And so for the first time, we're really worried about competition, in particular sectors like artificial intelligence, quantum, and 5G, the 5th generation of telecommunications.